Okay, and so welcome back for another lesson. Today's lesson is going to be over the Clinton presidency. He was president from 1993 until 2001. If you didn't know this, this is Hillary Clinton, who is running for president now. She is his wife. That's them when they were young. Okay, and so let's go ahead and look at the Clinton presidency. Okay, President Bill Clinton came from a poor Arkansas background, but he attended Yale Law School and met his future wife, Hillary. In 1992, Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas when he ran for president against George H.W. Bush, who already was the president, and Ross Perot. Now, typically, we only have two candidates in a major election. This election is interesting in the fact that there are three. And so we have Ross Perot, who is a wealthy businessman from the great state of Texas, and he is an independent. Okay, he is the most successful independent candidate to ever run. Okay, typically we only have a two-party system, and when there is a third, it's going to split up one of the party's votes, whether it's Democratic or the Republican. In this case, it took votes from the Republican, which allows Clinton to become president. So Americans believe President Bush hadn't done enough, and independent party candidate Perot split the vote, allowing President Clinton to win the presidency. And so here you go. That probably would have been George Bush's votes right here. And so therefore he would have won a re-election. So he would have been president from 88 until, come on, guy, 96. Okay, but instead, President Bill Clinton's going to win, or Governor Bill Clinton's going to win, become president. Okay, so let's look at his domestic policy. So when we talk about domestic policy, that means inside the country, domestic, as opposed to foreign, which means outside the country. So let's look at this. President Clinton cut federal spending and raised taxes on the rich and lowered taxes on the poorest Americans. Clinton proposed healthcare reforms is another word for changes, but failed to get them passed into law because you have to get it past the legislative branch. The end of the Cold War saw our national debt drop as military spending decreased. Okay, and so because there wasn't an arms race going on, because there wasn't a space race going on with the Soviets, which was the real reason we were able to defeat the Soviet Union and force them to spend so much to keep up with it, that it eventually just broke their bank. So military spending is going to decrease dramatically. Okay, here's a picture of a supporter of President Clinton's, and her sign says "Healthcare can't wait." The Clintons are very big, or they were very big into getting healthcare reforms passed. Something more effective than Obamacare, but Obamacare is something I'm sure Hillary Clinton, or Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, helped Obama draft that. So let's move on. We saw a huge national debt increase with Reagan. Okay, Reagan wanted to increase the military. Okay, it was Reaganomics, which we'll talk about in another lesson as well. But Reagan pretty much lowers taxes on the rich and increases the size of the military, and so he had very high approval ratings because we have lower taxes and a bigger military, so it's having your cake and eating it too. And so definitely Clinton, out of all those five presidents there, which is Jimmy Carter, which we'll talk about in another lesson, President Reagan, who's a Democrat, President Ronald Reagan from 1980 to 1988, who was a hardcore Republican. He is the shining example of what Republicans think a good president was. President George H.W. Bush, who was a Republican, and also President Reagan's vice president. Then we see President William Jefferson Clinton, President Bill Clinton. He had the lowest national debt increase. And when you look at the national debt, you're looking at overall. How much did you help increase the debt we've had since 1776, okay? And then you saw the national debt increase by 89% under George W. Bush, who was the son of George H.W. Bush. Okay, moving on. The U.S. economy prospered as unemployment went down, consumer spending increased, and business profits were at an all-time high, especially in the computer industry. This was the beginning time of the internet. Okay, the internet was had been around before, but it was becoming more accessible to the everyday American. Okay, this is the first time we saw this, and so we see a lot. It's called the dot-com bubble, and so we see a lot of different companies that start off Yahoo.com and dog food websites that where you could buy the dog food cheaper than it was, and not all these were successful business models because that website, for example, lost money until it collapsed, and so there was a lot of financial investments from banks into this dot-com bubble, and like the housing market is going to happen in 2008, like we talked about in the previous lesson, which is actually in the future, 2008. This industry is going to bust as well. But not yet. At this time, things are steadily increasing. At this time is when the United States had the lowest amount of unemployment ever. Okay, let's move on. The budget deficit. Okay, he campaigned on a promise to reduce taxes for the middle class. However, Clinton actually raised taxes on the middle class, cut them for the rich. So critics complained that the tax increase would hurt the economy because the middle class is the majority of people who go out there and spend, but that was turned out not to be the case. And so if we look at this first chart in the top right, it shows a Clinton budget. In 1998, he had a surplus. So he becomes president in 1992, and so you're climbing out of the deficit that you had been put in by mainly because of President Reagan. Okay, and so you climb. It takes you 6 years. So he gets out, or 5 years in 97. So by 1998, there's a $69 billion surplus. That means there's $69 billion that the government doesn't need. In 99, it increases to $125 billion. And by the year 2000, when he leaves President George W. Bush with a $236 billion surplus. Something that, George W. Bush is definitely going to spend, not only because he is going to have to react to the 9/11 attacks and increase military spending, but also because he and Dick Cheney, his vice president, are very staunch believers in the Reagan model, which said that deficits didn't matter. You could spend, and having a powerful military was definitely worth it. And so we see, the deficit by the time Bush leaves is $454.8 billion plus 236, and so let me do that really quick because I'm just curious now. $690.8 billion that Bush couldn't account for. Healthcare under Bill Clinton. Healthcare costs were rising, and tens of millions of Americans had little or no health insurance, which is still a major problem in the United States today. Hillary Clinton headed a special task force which proposed a government-sponsored program of healthcare. However, the plan was defeated after months of debate in Congress. Okay, and so that's another representation, another graph, which shows what the deficit was, and he climbs out of it, and then so 98, 99, and 2000, it's increasing, and then from then, it's just going to go down. Again, is that completely Bush's fault? Not necessarily. He had to deal with 9/11. Moving on. American globalization. The United States is going to start interacting more outside of his borders, business-wise. We've always interacted for a long time. There's a larger push, and so there's a focus of it during his presidency. So we're going to cover that. The North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, attempted to increase trade by eliminating trade barriers. There was definitely political controversy. It pretty much made it easier for Mexico, the United States, and Canada, which are the three countries in North America, to trade easier and with less taxes, and so it benefited everyone. Some jobs were created by NAFTA, but others were lost. Another thing you need to understand about this time period is outsourcing resulted in economic hardship for some U.S. workers. Okay, so when you outsource jobs, that means you are taking those jobs and sending them overseas. For example, Briggs & Stratton is a motor company which makes lawnmowers and other types of lawn equipment through the use of their combustible engines. However, recently since we've become more globalized, those jobs have been shipped overseas to China because in China, people will do the job for a lot less than $7.25, which is our minimum wage here. And so a lot of companies outsource their jobs overseas, and so therefore we both benefit from it. The companies benefit, and we also benefit from with it too, with lower prices on goods. So for example, Walmart. Walmart wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the Chinese workforce. Okay, or there's some place you can go and buy a $3 shirt or something like that. I mean, that's just very, very, very cheap, and that kind of labor is done in Asia, without a doubt. So that's outsourcing. Mechanization and globalization is going to mean a loss of U.S. manufacturing jobs and a shift to jobs in the service industry. So let's look why labor industries like working at automobile plants or in factories that produce tanks or planes or whatever, with the mechanization of these jobs, machines actually do those jobs now. And so a machine's never going to call in sick. A machine's never going to need to take a vacation. It doesn't take a bathroom break. It doesn't take a lunch break. It just works nonstop as long as it's working. And so that's going to a lot of companies are going to go to that because that saves them money too. You buy one expensive machine one time or whatever, and then you lay off hundreds of workers, thousands of workers, and you will make your money back soon. And after that, you'll be making more profit for yourself, which is just an example of American big business heads more focused about the wealthiest people than the actual workers, the actual middle class. And that's been a consistent theory or event we've seen with some types of presidents. I'm not going to say who. So we also see an influx of immigrants. So increased problem willing to do menial work jobs for low wages. Most people don't want to do the jobs that immigrants will. Moving on to NAFTA. Okay, President Clinton pushed through NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. NAFTA opened trade between the United States, Mexico, and Canada by lowering tariffs and regulations with the hope of increasing trade and stimulating economies of the three nations involved. Again, Canada, Mexico, and the United States. Some say this causes a loss of U.S. jobs because other nations have lower wages, fewer government regulations, and fewer environmental concerns. That is true. The U.S. also joined GATT, which is General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, to increase world trade. So this is an example of globalization. Moving on. He worked to develop NAFTA, an agreement to, which is pretty much an agreement to eliminate barriers to trade and investment between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. So at $248.2 billion for Canada and $163.3 billion for Mexico, they were the top two purchasers of U.S. exports in 2010. So the top two countries that bought American goods from other countries were Mexico and Canada. And then at $276.4 billion for Canada and $229.7 billion for Mexico, they were the second and third largest suppliers of goods imported to the United States in 2010. Okay. Other domestic challenges, I mentioned it earlier, the internet was just becoming a major thing, and so a lot of people saw it as a something they need to worry about because people were concerned about inappropriate material on the internet. Let's be real, they're talking about pornography. And so the White House tried to pass a law to limit the sexually explicit material, but the Supreme Court ruled that it violated the freedom of speech. And so that is why there is pornography on the internet today, because they lost that battle in court back in the 90s during Clinton's presidency. Okay, we're going to end right there, and we'll pick up with some other events of the Clinton presidency in the next video. But as always, thank you so much for your attention. If you have any questions about this lesson or anything else course related, please contact me through the class Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube channels. If you don't have that ability, hit me up via email at chrisdeleon@sbcisd.net. I hope that you enjoyed this film. I hope that it helps you feel more confident that you are going to pass this test, because you are. I will see you in the next video. Actually, I won't, but I'll see you in class tomorrow. Have a great day.